Joining me now to talk about this ridiculousness in the context of Texas's awesome economy is Chuck DeVore of the Texas Public Policy Institute. Chuck, good afternoon to you. I thought it was pretty much, I read this Texas Tribune article a couple of months ago where, it's a pretty lefty outfit, and they were kind of in agreement, begrudgingly so, that Texas's economy is good, that the income disparity that progressives love to holler about really isn't so much in existence in the state of Texas. But Perry says one thing about the Bible and about income and what Jesus said, and he's being excoriated over it by operatives and progressive media. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thought is that if the left and liberals appear to love the poor so much that their policies seem to create a lot more of them than do conservative free market policies. And I think that Exhibit A and B are the two biggest states in the country, Texas and California. The two biggest states both have majority-minority populations, very diverse economies. But if you compare the amount of per capita poor in each state, California has 47% more poor per capita than does Texas under a new U.S. Census Bureau measure called the Supplemental Measure of Poverty that, unlike the traditional measure, actually takes into account a little bit of the cost of living from state to state. A lot of folks don't know that the Census Bureau's traditional measure, they assume that the cost of living in Brooklyn, New York, is the same as the cost of living in Lubbock, Texas, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. Well, and in this, that you mentioned California, one of the things in the Salon piece that was written is that, well, Texas has the 5th highest level of income inequality. Why isn't California, which, is comparable to Texas in a lot of ways, they don't mention income inequality, which I think is a ridiculous phrase anyway, for California? Is it just simply because of politics, just because it's a Democrat-run state, so that makes it okay?
Well, plus your own, what are you using as a measure of income inequality?
Right.
That's the other problem is because it's not an official government measure, there are various ways of measuring income inequality. Now, I think that people who care about the poor, people who care about working Americans, ought to care less about income inequality, and they ought to care more about overall prosperity. And if you look at overall prosperity, again, Texas does a lot better than its big liberal neighbor on the left coast.
Now, tell me about the policies that have really contributed to making Texas's economy booming. I mean, you can't walk down the street in the state of Texas without somebody trying to throw a job at you. I don't think that people in the state can keep up with it. I see the highways changing all the time, Chuck, because more and more people are moving in, the traffic gets worse. Tell me about this, because this is one thing where you have people on the left who begrudgingly agree that the policies that Republicans have put in place in Texas have worked out great. I mean, if it wasn't for Texas, we'd be in the red in terms of job creation nationally.
Well, that's correct. If you look at the Tax Foundation's data, the taxfoundation.org, they do an annual ranking of state and local income, or state and local taxation, pardon me, as a share of state income. And Texas ranks 47th in the country, with only, as I recall, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Alaska taking less of their residents' tax money than does Texas. So 47th overall. And then, as you alluded to on the jobs front, since December 2007 to October, the most recent month for which we have data, so about 7 years from the beginning of the recession to present, Texas has added 1.4 million jobs in that 7-year period. The rest of the country, if you take Texas out of the equation, is minus 400,000 jobs. So if it weren't for Texas, America would actually have negative job growth since the beginning of the recession in December 2007. Now, that just doesn't just happen, right? That's the result of public policy. That's the result of low taxes. That's a result of a predictable regulatory climate and a certain amount of lawsuit reform that began in Texas about 11 years ago. And
it's true, too, is it not? And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Chuck, that across all income levels, wages have actually increased in the state.
Well, yeah, and that's the other very interesting thing is you hear a lot of criticism leveled at Texas. Well, there's just low-wage jobs. Well, if you look at the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, they do something called real per capita income. So this is real income as adjusted by the cost of living in the state. And Texas is actually in the middle of the pack. We're 25th out of the 50 states. But the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas has done further study and has shown strong job growth in Texas across all quartiles of income. So it isn't just adding jobs at the low end of the spectrum. Everybody is benefiting in Texas's job boom over the last several years.
Chuck DeVore with TexasPolicy.com is the website, Texas Policy Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your perspective on this.
Thank you.